usually is. Brown drives, scoop, layup off the glass.
It's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Sorry, knocked away.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. 17 days until preseason game 1. Not long to go, folks. Alongside me, as he often is, it's Jake Eisenberg, but we're bringing in two esteemed guests, brethren from the CLNS Media Network and co-hosts of the very awesome Celtics Lab podcast, Cameron Tabatabaie and Dr. Justin Quinn. Welcome, guys. How's it going?
That hype video, oh my goodness, I'm ready to run through a wall. Yeah. Also, Jared Sullinger shout out.
Yes, nice.
That's great.
Spot.
Everyone gets their moment in the sun on this podcast. Cameron, Dr. Justin Quinn, thank you so much for joining us. How's the offseason? We'll start with you, Cameron. How's the offseason been for you guys so far?
Boring is probably the correct answer. They got, I mean, they did their big move really early. It's been nice getting to know Jordan Walsh from afar. I'm ready. I'm ready for it to start. So it's been boring.
Yeah. Justin?
Boring is probably the most apt word you could use. It's also a lot of work because when there isn't actual news to report on, you have to go scrounging the darkest corners of the internet to try to find anything to keep the ball moving in the offseason. So I'm looking forward to not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Manufacturing content is something that we all become all too used to this time of year. And a little bit later, we're going to dive into some Celtics media stuff and get into podcasting. This will be the 5th installment of our Get to Know the Celtics media series. But first, some spicy Celtics-related reports coming out of ESPN by way of Ramona Shelburne.
But just how much, Ramona? Where do things stand between Brogdon and the Celtics now?
Look, I think I don't think the bad feelings are over, including him in any trade discussions. I mean, I think he's a professional. He knows this stuff happens. He understood why those discussions were happening. If anything, I think there was an expectation those discussions might restart. And so anytime your name is out there, it's a little uncomfortable. I think a lot of this has to do with what's going on with his elbow. He had that golfer's elbow during the playoffs, and there was some sense that he might need to get surgery on it. He did not do that, and there's a question of when he might be available, how he's available, and to the point where, this is what you're going to pay Joe Mazzulla this big money for. What you're going to pay Brad Stevens this money. You have to kind of mend some fences here, but he's still on the team. I don't think those trade talks restart anytime soon, and Jayson Tatum is going to spend a lot of time at point guard. When he was out here in Los Angeles, that was one of the things that he worked on, because that's frankly what he did quite a bit in the playoffs, is initiate the offense, and I think he played.
Yeah, so we'll get to the Tatum stuff in a second, but the Brogdon stuff, that seems to be what's sort of on the forefront of everyone's feed, Twitter, X, or Instagram, or elsewhere at the moment. Dr. Quinn, we'll start with you. Is this anything? Because it seems to me like it's really just the absence of anything said by Malcolm that is causing concern. I was ready to go all in on putting out that fire, given that it seems to be we're just, like we said, manufacturing content through the absence of any words from Malcolm Brogdon. Then Adam Himmelsbach comes out today, sort of adding a little bit more fuel to that fire and adding to my anxiety as a Celtics fan. So is or isn't there something to this concern with Malcolm Brogdon?
Well, I mean, the reporting from Himmelsbach is that he's still not at camp. There was another interview that I came across that also had Peyton Pritchard, I think, mentioning that he hadn't come into camp yet. He's not been in contact with people on the team, at least not very publicly that we know of. Whatever has been going on with him is going on behind the scenes, the media, including very connected people like Adam Himmelsbach, Gary Washburn, who brought up the whole, he thinks that he's angry at the Celtics. And then this report that you just showed from Ramona Shelburne, that just left me confused. It's exactly what it was she was trying to say. I mean, she framed it as "I think," but usually when people of her stature say something like that, it's usually informed. The lack of communication, particularly going into such an important season, and with him being such an important part with such a potentially concerning injury that may or may not need surgery and may or may not be related to him being angry, all boils down to, I think, the one line in the Himmelsbach article that just came out today saying that something feels off. What that is, we don't know. It's something to monitor. there's something going on, but it may be far less serious than we are being led to believe because of what you noted, or it could be something pretty serious.
Cameron, we'll throw it to you. We're all just I feel like we're all sitting here shrugging, being like, yeah, it could be something, it couldn't be something, we don't really know. And because of where we're at this juncture in the offseason, where we're sort of forced to bite down on this, Cameron, like, what's your angle here? Do you think that this is worth buying into, or are you more capable of, I guess, just shrugging it off and moving on?
Let me say three things. The first, it seems like my internet is having a hissy fit, so if I disappear, sorry in advance.
No worries.
Number two, I believe it was Dave D in the comments is already talking about Buddy Hield. I appreciate that enthusiasm, but I think probably we have to catch our breath. I'm going to try a new take on for size. It really is just occurring to me while Justin, you were talking. I see where Brogdon is coming from. He's had a really frustrating career, right? He was coveted rookie of the year, rookie first team, whatever it was.
Yeah, rookie of the year.
Yeah, and really talented player, unbelievable person. I mean, Justin and I both think really highly of him as an individual on and off the court. But I'm sure he was so pumped to join Boston, really join a contender. He was 6th man of the year, and then injured, kind of wore a lot of responsibility for some of the losses in the playoffs. At least that was the commentary, whether or not that was true. And now, they got to walk back this trade. So I see where Malcolm's coming from. It's probably a whirlwind of emotions that really stinks. He's a professional. He's a professional's professional. I suspect even if he's feeling sour grapes, the moment it's time to put up or shut up, he will arrive and he will do his job and he'll do it well. But it's certainly, reaching back to when Brad talked to the media about Porzingis, people would ask about Brogdon. It was kind of like, yeah, we'll learn answers in a few weeks. We don't really know right now. And I never really thought much of it. So now chickens are coming to roost, and it's really interesting. But I suspect Brogdon will be a professional about this if he's still on the team in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I do think Brogdon in particular is someone that just keeps to himself. And you talk about all these other guys on social media, Jalen, Jayson, talking about looking for content and scrounging. Malcolm Brogdon's Instagram is not a place you're going to find a lot. The most recent post was 24 weeks ago, and you talk about him being a great guy off the court. It's in a social justice coalition post, and then the post before that is 40 weeks from now, and it's just a bottle of wine. I think this is just the kind of guy that keeps to himself. I know Landon in the comments here was saying that Goodman told Forsberg that Brogdon was working out in Atlanta after the draft with Horford, he mentioned. So, Landon, this is on you. I know you got your finger on the pulse. But yeah, as far as being bought in when it comes to being traded, that part I'm with you. I don't think that's really going to matter once training camp starts and it's time to win a title and you're surrounded by Jalen and Jayson and everyone's pulling in one direction. Brogdon, to me, is not the type of guy that's going to be causing an issue. What is slightly concerning to me is the elbow. Now that we've heard a couple people mention it, that's where I'm worried. We just don't know though. We're going to find out in a few days once training camp starts. Is Malcolm Brogdon practicing? If he is, then all of these concerns go out the window, and he's on track to be a finalist for 6th man of the year again. But I know Dave mentioned Buddy Hield in the chat. Do you? Ben, I'll throw it to you. Do you think is Brogdon the most likely trade candidate? Buddy Hield? Is it actually going to do you actually see that happening?
Well, I think Brogdon was already the most likely trade candidate just by way of his salary and the constraints that are on the horizon with the new CBA. That's the most obvious chunk of change to try and diversify and reduce from your overall from your books. But now it's just this coincidence now that as these rumors of Brogdon's, disdain for the franchise and overall unhappiness have come up at the same time as this report from Shams around Buddy Hield, they're not negotiating a contract extension. The fact that those are happening coincidentally, it leads one to just naturally wander down the path mentally of could this trade potentially be a thing? And my straight up answer is just no for both teams. If the Pacers are shopping Buddy Hield, they're going to expect more back in return for him. They're going to want significant-ish draft capital. Like, yes, the Celtics have a litany of second-round picks that they can throw back at the Pacers, but I feel like they'll be dangling Buddy Hield for at least a first, like a mid to low back end of the first round pick. And then just to get Brogdon back, like, that's not what we want. Like, I don't want to paint Brogdon with this brush, but like looking at it from the Pacers perspective, like we got rid of our old, like we dropped off our old clothes at the thrift store. We're not going to go and buy them back, you know? Again, not to paint Brogdon with that brush. He's more of a high-end fashion here.
I get some good stuff I get some really good stuff from the thrift store. Some of my best items are from the thrift store every day. Yeah. So I think that's a compliment, if anything.
Yeah. So, Justin, I can see you're deep in thought here. Like, do you think that there's any value in exploring this from the Pacers and the Celtics perspective?
So, as you pointed out, the mind naturally goes there. The salary is $3.3 million less. That's exactly what Boston needs. You can sign another player for that and still have some wiggle room rather than pushing right up against the end of the second apron, which the Celtics are almost certainly, unless an amazing opportunity comes their way to sign like a blue chip, true bona fide star on a great deal that's not going to like screw them in the future, meaning it's not going to happen. There is some other problems with a potential deal, and you kind of pointed it out. Like your thrift store metaphor might be a little bit brutal, but it's not that far from the truth. But like, let's make it even friendlier than that. They worked with Boston to try to get him to the Celtics because that's where he wanted to go, and they tried to do him a favor, which means they were clearly done with him, and he was clearly done with them. So why would they reunite? So that means if there's a plausible deal here, unless things have changed, which they really don't seem to have in terms of their backcourt that much, then they're going to need to find a third team, and that means the price is going to go up, and they're already looking for a first. So that means you're going to throw in another second or two or three, maybe another young player. And at some point, you're getting into the forest of ifs, and when you see like ifs like trees, then that is not going to happen, in my personal philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Cameron?
Justin, that was so beautiful. Why don't you use metaphors like that on Celtics Lab?
I don't know.
That was, wow, you're really in your bag there. I think,
you know why? It's because I'm not like producing while I'm talking.
There you go.
Actually, Justin is so right about that. It's such a different experience not having to host and look at the notes.
Totally. Yeah.
You just fire your takes away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so relaxed. It's great. I feel like I'm such a bozo when I have to host our podcast. I feel great right now. I wish I had a better answer for this, but I could see it going in one of two directions. In the abstract, every team should line up for Buddy Hield. He's a volume 3-point shooter, and he hits at a really high clip. Yeah, Horford and Brogdon, hit a technically higher percentage, but Hield is hucking them and hitting them, right? So if you are the Knicks, if you're the Sixers, if you're the Bucks, like if you're any team with aspirations to compete, you could find a role for Buddy Hield, and at like $19-ish million, you could probably patch together some salary. However, if every team and their mother is getting ready to make a package for Giannis or Embiid, as the reporting goes, who's going to throw out an extra first-round pick for an expiring Buddy Hield contract? So like, are the Boston Celtics about to make a play for Embiid or Giannis? Probably not. Could they outcompete New Orleans or Utah or Oklahoma City? Almost definitely not.
This season.
But if there's like a 0.005% chance that that Golden State first rounder could be used to sweeten the deal to get a bigger fish, is moving on from Brogdon for Buddy Hield interesting to Boston in the abstract? And then it goes to your question, Ben, about Indiana. What if everyone's thinking that? And Indiana's not getting phone calls from the Lakers or phone calls from, pick your favorite contender, because they're actually hoarding assets too. And so maybe the asking price for Buddy Hield is, hey, he's an expiring guard who, he can shoot the ball. He hasn't done that much else. He's a little disgruntled, as, people are disgruntled here and there. Maybe it actually isn't a slam dunk if you have eyes for, a bigger prize.
I love it. This is why we do this, right, Jake? Like we think about, we almost overthink and overanalyze these situations, which have, I think, a nice solid degree of simplicity to them. But this is why we're Celtics podcast, is because we're capable of peeling back all the layers and thinking about it from all the different perspectives and really getting nerdishly excited about it. Jake, do you have anything left on that before we move on to the Tatum point guard stuff?
No, I would enjoy Buddy Hield on the Celtics, but I would enjoy Giannis Antetokounmpo more on the Celtics. So definitely keep your powder dry. I know, Dr. Quinn, you did mention your little sly comment there. Celtics not this year would have the package, but yeah, I see where you're going.
I don't want to add any more fuel to that fire. It's been burning so long. I just want to see it go out. But it is something that needs to at least be in the back of our minds.
I agree.
All right, let's circle back.
Wait, can I?
Please.
Ben, can I hop in? So Justin and I have been so aligned on this buddy thing all day, like more than usual. Justin, where are you at with the buddy thing?
Well, let me put it this way. Buddy Hield has never, in his entire career, played less than 71 games. Malcolm Brogdon has played more than 71 games precisely one time in his career. That's where I'm at.
I'm in for it. Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna get to the Tatum point guard thing like right now. But like,
Let's do it.
Brogdon's not really a point guard anyway. And Buddy Hield, like you talk about shooting, like Brogdon's best thing last season was the fact that he was an elite shooter and was giving you scoring punch off the bench. Buddy Hield, when you're surrounding Tatum with shooters like this, Buddy Hield's on a completely different level of shooter, even than Brogdon. That 44% last year, hopefully he gets that mark again, but realistically, he's probably not getting to 44% again. Buddy Hield and Halliburton were an elite transition 3 combo last season. We had Caitlin Cooper on here last episode talking about the Pacers, and Halliburton and Derek White have a lot of similarities in how they like to have hit-ahead passes and push the pace. Derek White and Buddy Hield would be a really, really, really fun combination in transition to really juice the offense. And defensively, Brogdon's probably better defensively, but like, there's
Not much.
Yeah, there's a lot to be desired there as well.
You guys are talking me into it. I mean, I'm not against it. It's more, it just comes back to the
It's not going to
Pacers
happen. So
it's
let's
not
just
gonna
cry
happen.
now.
They just don't want to reacquire Malcolm Brogdon. But, I mean, for people wondering, Buddy Hield, he's entering the final year of his contract for $18.5 million. Malcolm Brogdon, 2 years left at $22.5 million. So comparable salaries there on that side of things. Like, it can get done. But again, I just don't think the Pacers want to reacquire. They're all close. I'm sorry to use that analogy again. All right, let's circle back on that Ramona Shelburne comment on Jayson Tatum playing point guard.
Jayson Tatum is going to spend a lot of time at point guard. When he was out here in Los Angeles, that was one of the things that he worked on, because that's frankly what he did quite a bit in the playoffs, is initiate the offense. And I think he plays even more of that role going forward this season.
Okay, so when he was out in LA hanging out with Paul Pierce and co, he was allegedly practicing playing the point guard. Cameron, were you surprised to hear these comments? I hesitate to call it a report because it seems more just like editorialization, if that's the right word, on Ramona Shelburne's part. Do you see this as a surprise that we might see more Tatum point guard action going into this season?
No, but I also don't think that that language exists in the Celtics front office. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the traditional 5 position depth chart matters to Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla in the same way. I'm going to try a take on for size that is out there. So everyone, I promise I'm squinting when I make this analogy.
This
I'm
is
stretching.
the forum for it.
Perfect.
I can see how this Celtics team should play like the 2012 Miami Heat. That LeBron is secretly the point guard and Jayson Tatum is secretly the point guard. That Jaylen Brown comes in like Dwayne Wade and cleans up and slashes and makes big plays. That Kristaps Porzingis and Bosch, I don't know, stand in the corner and shoot threes. And then you on and on and on, you have these role players that do certain things. So was Mario Chalmers technically the point guard? Sure. Is Derek White technically the point guard? Sure. But Jayson Tatum's the head of the snake, whether or not he is, guarding other point guards on the other team, or he, technically has the most touches, I guess is incidental. The offense is going to run through him. And with exception, he's going to be the one to either score the ball or the play is going to run through him. So it's a semantic thing, I think. And it's a sexy off-season way of framing it. But at the end of the day, Tatum's usage rate is going to be a little higher than Brown, Porzingis, and higher than most. So it'll look a lot like a point guard's stats and usage. But I don't think he's going to dribble the ball the way Kyrie does, or do things that a traditional point guard does in the same way.
I like that analogy because Jayson Tatum is technically LeBron James, which
I said I'm squinting. When you squint from far away.
No,
I'm
that's pretty good.
Fully bought into that. Dr. Quinn, Jake, we'll get to you in a second. Do you echo Cameron's sentiments there?
Well, I do, but from a much more workaday, shall we say, perspective, in that if they wanted a traditional point guard to be the main way they bring the ball up the floor, then Marcus Smart would probably still be on the team and doing that. If you try for half of a decade to get a certain style of play out of players and it just never materializes, does it make sense to keep smashing your head against the wall and trying to get that to happen? Or do you want to get the player who refuses to do something differently or can't or won't or whatever the deal is behind that? Why not just get him better at that specific task, which seems to be the plan?
Yeah, look, and Ramona saying more. What did you say? More point guard. He played a lot of point guard anyway, right? Like when it comes down to it, Tatum's been the guy with the ball in his hands at the end of games a lot already. A lot of it's been Marcus Smart. I do think, and using like kind of the LeBron 2012 kind of as a jumping off point, the Celtics ceiling, the best version of the Celtics is probably with, especially when it comes to crunch time, is Tatum with the ball in his hands, initiating the offense. Derek White's going to be the point guard for a lot of the season, for a lot of the game, and Tatum's going to be the second guy doing that. And, Derek White's going to be maybe, he's the better passer. Marcus Smart was definitely a better passer than Jayson Tatum, but their playmaking upside is just going to be capped just because they're not the same level of scoring threat that Jayson Tatum is. And when you have that level of scoring, playmaking becomes a little bit easier. And so to get Tatum these reps starting, getting him more reps throughout the season, by the time we get to the playoffs, he's going to have all those reps. He's going to be better, prepared to have that role. Hopefully we're not seeing as many turnovers come playoff time. And again, 2 years down the line, where we're still, we want peak Tatum to be this year, but the reality is it's still not coming another 2-3 years from now. Getting these reps into Tatum's hands over and over again is really important. And I think that's the actualized version of Tatum. Is he's never going to be a LeBron level playmaker because, he's literally maybe one of the best playmakers of all time, especially at that size. It's like Magic Johnson and LeBron James and Luka Doncic. It's like, okay, we don't need Tatum to be that good for them to win a title at that specific skill. But I do think someone that's gotten better at playmaking, like a lot, significant improvements year over year in playmaking. In the bubble was the biggest one that we saw, and again last year I thought we saw improvements in the playmaking. So you give him a legit pick and roll, pick and pop weapon like Porzingis. I do think that we can see more advancements in the Tatum on ball, initiating, point guard, whatever you want to call it. The reality is he's going to be on the ball, he's going to be off the ball. It's what makes Tatum so amazing, is that he can do all of these things. But they're going to be trying stuff out. As we've kind of said, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like.
Yeah, and he's just naturally going to get more possessions as the playmaker or as the ball handler in lieu of Marcus Smart. Like Marcus Smart's gone now. That's X amount of point guard possessions up for grabs, and Tatum is a naturally good playmaker. If you've watched the Celtics at all, Tatum is probably the best on the team and the only one capable of drawing a double and then making the appropriate play out of that double. I think where he gets into trouble and where some of the hesitation is he can get trapped and panic. If he gets trapped at the half-court line, suddenly you've got to send someone to the ball to get that relief pass from Tatum, and then you're not really going into a scoring action out of that movement. And I think that's where you get into trouble. And we saw that in the playoffs a little bit, and where some of the frustration of Tatum slowly bringing the ball up over the line and getting trapped, and the Celtics going into panic mode rather than organized offense mode is a problem. But Tatum's young, and with perhaps more coaching, more directive, more preparation going into the season, knowing he's going to get more of those possessions, there are ways to avoid that. And then, Jake, you mentioned Porzingis, who is like head in the clouds tall. Suddenly those relief passes get easier if Tatum does get trapped, and especially when you consider there's one less defender in the front court. If you're sending guys up to the half-point line to defend Tatum, he can make those relief passes to Porzingis, who can make an endless amount of plays off the catch there. So I think there's a lot more opportunities for Tatum this year playing as the primary point guard as I add Cameron back in here. Welcome back, Cameron. The Wi-Fi is good?
Hey, no, but it's back.
You're back. That's the main thing. The main thing is you're
It's a CLNS tradition to have bad or Boston area internet, so.
Absolutely. We're all very happily members of the CLNS family. So it sounds like we're all in agreement that, for Tatum running the point guard, it's going to be a case of everything in moderation. There's going to be a slight uptick in his possessions playing the point, given Marcus Smart has been shipped out, but ultimately where he's demonstrated that he's capable, and we're happy to see him have a few more of those possessions. Now, we do want to move on and get to some of our Celtics media stuff. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night talking about things that have not yet come to pass, a la Jayson Tatum playing point guard and Malcolm Brogdon supposedly being unhappy with the Celtics. And so with that, we're going to get to a fan favorite segment called the Schadenfreude Report.
Schadenfreude.
The Sixers.
Schadenfreude. The Lakers. Schadenfreude.
The Heat.
Schadenfreude.
Milwaukee Bucks.
Schadenfreude.
Warriors.
Schadenfreude.
Take it away, Jake.
Let's go. My favorite segment. All right, the Schadenfreude Report. It's all about our enemies stumbling, failing, anything of that nature. We haven't really hit on the Giannis stuff since he's gone on this little tour talking about how if the Bucks aren't committed to winning, it doesn't look like they can win a title, he's going to have to look elsewhere. I feel like, Celtics dealt with coded versions of this from Jaylen Brown, I think, across the years. So Bucks fans are and media are kind of saying, we know this is nothing new. From my perspective, I don't want my superstar going on, and this is very explicit, being like, if this team's not good, I'm leaving. And I think it says a lot about how he feels about the current situation. I've been someone who's been quite down on the Bucks roster. The reason they have a chance to win the title is because Giannis Antetokounmpo is a tier 1A player, and anytime you have a guy like that on your roster, you're going to have a chance to win a title. But the roster around them, they don't have a fifth starter. Their fifth starter is Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton or Malik Beasley or Bobby Portis. When you don't have a guy that you're comfortable as your fifth guy, as opposed to the Celtics where it's Horford, Rob Williams, Brogdon, guys that you all feel pretty comfortable can be a fifth man in a starting lineup. I guess the real big question is, I know you kind of touched on it. Do the Celtics have, maybe we don't ever want to do this whole conversation, but do the Celtics have potentially the best package for trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo this time next year? Because, not to throw the fire on the flame, I went through the top players in the NBA, and most of them are not going anywhere. And Jayson Tatum and Giannis Antetokounmpo on the same team would be just a scary, scary place for the rest of the league. We don't even have to get into if the Celtics would do it, but this is not a good thing for the Bucks, I don't think, to have this anvil hanging over their head going into the season. Anytime they lose a big game, anytime they lose to a contender, 2-game losing streak, it's going to be, they look slow, they look this. Giannis, how do you feel about that? It's a lot to deal with, and LeBron has played this game before, and it leads to a lot of drama, which I'm not sure the Bucks are ready to kind of handle. Throw it to you, Cameron.
AA in the comments is loving this. So what is on brand for the Schadenfreude Report is just celebrating the collective misery of other fan bases, and Giannis sort of indicating that he might want to go elsewhere. It aligns with that perfectly. Getting into the conversation about potentially trading Jaylen Brown, who it would be for Giannis down the road for. That complicates things a little bit more because it starts to make me anxious and the Celtics fan base anxious as well, I think. I think you're right, Jake, in that, yes, we would have the ideal trade candidate in Tatum, salary matching.
Jaylen, I don't want to get anyone confused. You said Tatum. I just want to.
I did? Oh, my God. See, I'm already discombobulated by the mere thought of it. So, yes, it's Jaylen Brown, to be fair. Let's be very clear. And this is live, so we can't edit that out. Yes, we would be well poised for that. But I'm so excited by the championship hopes this season. I almost don't want to think about it. That said,
that's why I'm like...
Yeah, well, it's a free.
They have to want it too, right?
That's right.
the Bucks probably want the sort of player they're losing in Giannis. And while I don't know if they will be able to realistically get exactly that back, because that's so hard to pull off, I don't necessarily, Jalen might be able to run his own team, but they would have to strip that team down to the studs to surround him with the kind of players, because the players who are on it now are not the kind of players that are going to complement Jaylen Brown. So I have my doubts about the validity of that. And personally, I think everyone should just, with the assets that they have and the roster that they have, I don't see how they're going to assemble another championship team around Giannis. So they should just bite the bullet, get what they can for him, and everything else on the roster, tear it completely down to the studs, and start over, which is not going to work, but neither is the situation they're in. And deluding themselves into thinking there's some way they can retain him is not going to get them anywhere, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a nuclear take, Justin.
Whoa, yeah. It's like, don't even play this season out. Let's just blow it up now.
I agree with Justin. A year from now, that's definitely the take. This is misguided. The person that Boston should be ready to pull the trigger on is Joel Embiid. The fit with Tatum is so much better. I don't know. I just think that the calculus of if you're going to change everything about your organization, Giannis, Porzingis, and Tatum doesn't fit as well as Porzingis, Tatum, and Embiid, and even that is kind of a weird stretch. So I'm team go get Donovan Mitchell with Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, figure that one out. But
or Buddy Hield.
Or Buddy Hield.
Same, all the same type of plays.
I mean, both awesomely interesting takes, and I partially agree with the premise of both of them. I do feel like I need to just reel us in a little bit here, because we're about to go into a championship season where we're talking about trading our second best player. Jake, I think you were sort of shrugging a little bit at the notion of acquiring Joel Embiid, and I think part of that, and to bring it back to the Schadenfreude aspect of this segment, is because we just hate the Sixers so very much. And there is some Sixers news that you wanted to go over. Am I right, Jake?
Yeah. This one is a little more in the spirit of the Schadenfreude report, just because it's dumb and fun. The Sixers have signed Kelly Oubre, who we've talked about on this podcast as someone that, just please keep that person away from my basketball team. I just don't think that he's a winning player. I think there's some really bad advanced stats with him, like his assist to turnover stuff is just disastrous, considering someone who scored 20 points per game. One of my favorite things to do is listen to the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast anytime the Sixers do anything, because one, they have a really good informed take, but it's mostly been very bad for the past, especially this off season. So it's always fun to tap into them for some Schadenfreude. And Spike is relatively tapped into, the NBA world, and so he had a list of texts that he read out to Mike from people around the NBA talking about Kelly Oubre, and it was just, you don't realize how much he sucks until he plays on your team. He's just he's good enough where you have to play him, but he's so destructive that it makes you want to die. But the best story that they told was James Harden hosted a party, and he was with a girl, and Kelly Oubre turned up and ended up leaving the party with James Harden's girl. Harden. Yeah, so go ahead.
I was going to interject and say everything you're saying is valid, but confirm or deny Tsunami Papi is the most good-looking NBA player.
It's pretty. I don't know. I mean, Al has the eyes at least.
Yeah, I
don't know about the rest.
The whole package. Oubre's got the whole thing, and he wears a nose ring, which that's.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I think Oubre is clearly in tier one. If he's not the just the guy at the top of the list.
Rick Fox vibes, definitely.
Yeah, totally fair. So obviously he took Harden's girl. I mean, that was a no-brainer for this girl. So Kelly Oubre married this girl. This is his wife, and now Kelly Oubre's going to the Sixers, and that whole thing. Apparently, Harden almost shut the whole party down. It was a whole thing. So it's just the most Sixers thing possible to bring in. Not only as a player that is destructive on the court, where they need good vibes, they need good vibes players. To bring in a guy like that, I think if you can convince yourself, if it works out, great. You've brought in this 20-point-per-game scorer. He's athletic on the wing. The Sixers don't have anyone like that. But he doesn't do that. The only time he's been in a winning situation was the Warriors, and they hated him. And then you add in this additional thing where Harden's already just I don't want to be there, and now you've got this hot guy that stole my girlfriend thing going on. It's just like, it's fantastic.
This is why we do the Schadenfreude report. Doesn't it make you feel awesome that the Sixers have just added to their suffering by way of adding a player to their roster? A very good looking, as we've all agreed on, and a somewhat talented player to their roster. But we do have to move on for time, and we want to get to know the Celtics media portion of the show and get to know Cameron and Dr. Quinn a little bit better. But before that, a quick word from our sponsor. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Jake, we'll be quick here, but do you have a sample? Thanks, Landon. I appreciate that, mate. Do we have a sample NFL bet that you can throw? I know the Patriots are pretty underwhelming at the moment. What have you got?
No, I think they are underwhelming. I threw it out earlier in the week, but I think Patriots -2.5 versus Jets. Bill Belichick versus Zach Wilson. And if this doesn't work, at -2.5, it's a good enough spread where it's pretty much Patriots win and you're feeling pretty good. And if they don't, then it's time to just hope that the Patriots lose every single game and get Caleb Williams, because if they can't beat Zach Wilson at home and go 0-3, then forget about it. So Patriots -2.5, that's what I'm riding with this week.
All right, love it. Let's move right on. Cameron, Dr. Quinn, I'm really excited to have you guys on because I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I love the Celtics Lab podcast. I've been listening for quite a while now, like I want to say years. And I want to start with, first of all, what piqued my interest about you guys is where we have alignment beyond just doing podcasts for CLNS is that we all maintain careers and jobs outside of, I suppose, for lack of a better term, moonlighting as Celtics journalists. And I want to say just right off the bat that you guys are much more legitimate in your pursuit in covering the Celtics from a journalistic perspective than we are, and being so far away. But let's start just from the beginning, how you got into this whole mess. You both work full-time in various fields. Cameron, we'll start with you. Like, how have you then fallen into covering the Celtics, as well as I believe you're a full-time teacher? How did you go from just being a teacher to also covering the Celtics? And then how do you maintain both of those pursuits at once?
I'm just going to say while I go on a monologue, if my Wi-Fi cuts out again, at least I got in the fact that Kelly Oubre is handsome. I'm glad my Wi-Fi
hit all the important
for that. After graduating, a site that is either on pause or has been retired called Celtics Hub, the editor-in-chief, Brian Robb, was looking for writers. I reached out to him, and this was a different era. The team was bad, and the media access was just, they had different rules and regulations. So I got really lucky that out of college, I got this, blog, as Kevin Durant would put it, I was a blog boy for Celtics Hub. And again, the Celtics weren't very good, so there wasn't that much interest in covering them in person. And I was working as a substitute teacher, so, I had time to blog, I had time to go to games. And I worked in marketing. I, bounced around professionally. As I was saying off air, I lived in Australia for a little bit. But I always maintained some sort of blogging gig, just because either it was good beer money or it was a way to, make myself think intentionally about the NBA, because I love the NBA. So I wrote for Pick and Roll down in Australia.
Great.
But really just because I wanted to, stay engaged with the game. Justin, I've never bounced this off of you, so let me give my history or my memory of it and fill in the blanks. When I was back stateside, I was going to grad school. I was still writing for different sites. I was writing for a site called Off the Glass. I was writing about the Celtics a little more than the other teams I would cover. And Justin and I connected. I ended up being a guest on the Celtics Lab podcast, and then a recurring guest, and then we had chemistry, no pun intended. So then I started doing that. Justin is the editor-in-chief over at Celtics Wire, and when a position opened up, P and I talked. So first of all, Justin, thank you. But
Thank you. The pleasure's been all ours.
I think that's the story. Did I miss anything about how we connected? And then obviously, tell your story. But Ben, to answer your question, I have two jobs, and when you have two jobs, you work hard. I'm not trying to be flip about it, but
I do not work hard. I work all the time, but I don't work hard.
Yeah, I work all the
There is a
time. I don't know
difference.
if you work hard. No, it's the thrill of a lifetime. I'm so privileged to do this. It does mean long hours. It does mean, lack of sleep, some school nights. Don't tell my students. But it has really been, I've been very lucky. I've been really blessed. I have been tenacious, but truly, stars have aligned, and I've just been lucky to be there for the ride. So the correct answer is work long hours. Incidentally, maybe not hard, but work long hours, and connect yourself to smart people like Justin.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Justin, anything to add to that, to your perspective on that journey?
I remember that he was one of the people who, for Off the Glass, was also really into helping other people further their craft, which really, it made me think this is a person I want to work with, because he's not just thinking about himself. And when you try to pay it forward, I think that's an important way, not just to develop your own abilities as not necessarily a leader, but someone who is willing to share knowledge for the betterment of the coverage of what we are covering, in this case, the Celtics. But in any case, yeah, he's a really nice guy. I like working with him.
It helps. It helps when they're nice people. It makes them much
Someone's
easier.
cutting onions. Goodness gracious.
Jacinto has popped in, so if I get a cat in my lap, apologies.
Oh, we're very used to that. Spoonie's cat
Yep.
jumping on his lap. His cat's name is Cookie, I believe. Part of the first of the floor bingo game. So there you go. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear, I guess, the origin story, especially for me as a long-time listener. Jake, I believe you have the next question.
Yeah, what have been the biggest barriers? Is it for you to get
Hey, I didn't get to say mine.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Come on.
Oh, sorry.
That's a great story.
Here I am, just moving ahead. So rude of me. Sorry.
No, it's
Quinn, go
okay,
ahead.
because you're completely wrong. I am not an educator anymore. I have retired from the field, and part of the reason why is because I'm an anthropologist. I don't know anything about medicine beyond what I have to learn to teach bioarchaeology, bioanthropology, and human genetics, which is not much, to be completely honest, at least compared to a doctor of medicine. So my degree, I got it in 2019. I decided I was going to take a little bit of time, like maybe a year roughly, before I went in the job search, because I heard how grueling the academic job search was. I had a friend who applied for 100 positions and got a 1-year visiting professor position out of all of that.
Wow.
So I did not need that after 10 years in school working towards that degree. So I took some time off, and before I had started doing that, I had been, while I was finishing my dissertation, you can't just go cold into that kind of writing. You have to kind of warm your brain up to it by doing anything related to writing at all that's not academic writing. So I would write for this site that I know you guys, I'm pretty sure, are aware of, called Celtics Life, where I would write for them every morning, a couple articles here and there. And they liked my stuff and promoted me. And when that relationship ended and I moved on to a different organization that, let's just say, paid me for my time a little bit better, they continued to throw stuff at me. And eventually they made me the editor, which was pretty strange. I'm obviously talking about Celtics Wire. I don't know why they're crazy enough to do that, but the reason why I'm in Mexico in the first place is because I'm an anthropologist. I met my wife here. She ignored on my OkCupid profile that I wasn't going to be here very long. And we're going on 6 years now. So, yeah, that is awesome. How I got into this and here.
That's really cool. I honestly, I just genuinely really enjoy, and I've really enjoyed this series that we've done in the off season, is understanding and getting to know everyone's foray into this industry. At whatever point they're at in that industry. So from both of you, genuinely interesting, and it's great, I think, for me and people listening who are fans of Celtics Lab to get to know you guys better from that perspective. Jake, you had a question about, and we've hit this multiple times, just barriers in this industry. Jake, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, firstly, I mean, I think you've probably learned a lot in 10 years of that kind of, education relative to my 3 years of media, public relations, and advertising. That was really an education in beer in Australia, if we're being completely honest.
But you don't have to pay it off for the rest of your life. So
This is true. Our school is so much cheaper, especially a degree like that. So that was fun. But yeah, like what have been, I guess, some of the biggest barriers to where you're getting now, whether that's from a life perspective, getting credentials, talking to players. Take it anywhere you go. I'll start with you, Cameron.
There's a lot of them. It's a job with a limited number of slots, right? Certainly since COVID, I think for a long time, I think the MBPA wanted to be more specific about who gets into a locker room, who gets credentialed, and they used COVID to set new boundaries, which as well they might. I kind of understand their perspective. So quite frankly, you got to get lucky because there are so many slots. But that being said, like any one individual, it is a meritocracy of a sort. So yes, there are certain gates that are kept. There are some specific limitations on the number of press credentials. But like this podcast, for example, is proof positive. People who are smart, who have the tenacity and the time and the effort can start to build a name for themselves. I think there's a horrible quip, Justin, you've heard me say this before, which is you're not a real sports writer until you've experienced your first layoff. It's a really fickle field, right? And I saw online, I wish I could attribute the tweet, but someone said, look, with all these legacy media places closing or rearranging, never has it been more important to make a brand as an individual. And through social media, whether it's Twitch or a podcast or tweeting or whatever your niche is, you do have an opportunity to create a following and create a voice. And when outlets that already have a relationship with the team or the NBA or something, when they are looking for someone to hire, they can find someone. So the barriers are interesting because like they're so obvious and specific, but at the same time, talent can speak for itself. And that demands a lot of hours, that demands a lot of perseverance and being clever and a little lucky, maybe a lot lucky. So it's interesting, Jake, like it cuts both ways. Like in some ways it's never been harder because they're cracking down. And in other ways it's never been easier because there's so many ways to prove to the world, like, hey, I've got it, come find me. Specifically, like there are interpersonal barriers. Like I'll say this, so I'm so blessed to cover the game, right? Like it's really a thrill. Again, I'm in a really unique position. I feel shy sometimes. Like I'm a teacher. I'm a former camp counselor. Like I don't feel shy that often in my life. There are times where I'm like sitting and getting ready to ask a 22-year-old something about basketball.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh no, I feel so shy. I feel so embarrassed. So there's a certain, like apropos of all of the grandstanding I was just doing, there is like a moxie that goes into it. I think you kind of have to be a little crazy in the head to think that like you have the charisma and the right to do it. But like, hey, anyone listening to this probably does, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like not that I'll ever get to that position where I'm, sitting in a press conference asking questions, but if a microphone was thrown in my direction, I could confidently say that I would shit my pants. I'd be so nervous that I hope that it never happens to me. But before we've got some questions around like feeling out of your depth, around covering the Celtics. But before we get to that, like Justin, you're obviously in a different situation to Cameron. You're international. You've had a different approach to it to get to where you are now. Have you similarly felt that there are some barriers in getting to your level?
Absolutely. And, Cam kind of brushed up against him in terms of the access. He can't get into the locker rooms all the time because of these new COVID rules. I can't even get into the arena because, like you guys, I'm in another country, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm covering a team where I am nowhere near and not likely to be near them unless, of course, they come here to Mexico City and play in the Mexico City game, which happens – I think 2014 was the last time they came. So I don't expect to see them this season or anytime soon. And then when I do get opportunities to interview NBA players in the town that I live in, the city that I live in, it's in the context of having to communicate en español como así, en un idioma que no estoy súper confortable hablando. I'm not super comfortable talking in Spanish. I can do it because I live here and I studied a culture that Spanish is the primary language that's spoken in that country. but it's not my native language. And exactly what Kim was talking about in those moments where you realize there might be a camera on you and there might be hundreds, thousands, millions of people seeing you on YouTube, live, whatever. And that gives you a certain level of anxiety that, you get used to it over time, but it's still there. Like when the Spurs were in town for the last Mexico City game, I finally got my chance to ask Greg Popovich a question. And yes, I was shitting my pants. So it never goes away.
As you should be. Are you kidding, Greg? That's awesome. Greg Popovich? That's a cool thing.
He disemboweled the person before me too, but I guess asking about Romeo Langford was the right person to ask about that day. So
I once saw Greg Popovich having a glass of wine in Sydney Harbour when they were over here for FIBA in 2019, and I was purposefully walking around the touristy areas knowing the team was in town, hoping I would encounter them. I walked past Jayson Tatum and his family. I walked past Greg Popovich, and I didn't approach either of them because of that. Sorry to use the term again, but that notion of shitting your pants. Way too nervous, and they just seem too unapproachable. And a guy like Greg Popovich, who clearly has this like underlayer, this undertone of kindness, as a kindness to his soul, he has a grisly outer layer that makes him very difficult to approach. So that, I can imagine, in itself is a barrier, just different individual personalities that you're sort of required to engage in your role in the media.
I do not envy Cameron trying to crack the outward portrayal of Joe Mazzulla, who has a very similar bedside manner.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what year 2 brings for Mazzulla.
Yeah, I hope he softens up a little bit. I reckon he will.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. But Justin, to your point, like, he's my age. Like,
yeah,
it's so funny to feel that moment of like, uh-oh, my feathers are ruffled. But then it's like, actually, this dude is like functionally a peer, and like he's kind of being weird. So maybe he's the awkward one, and I'm not the awkward one.
I would say definitely when Joe Mazzulla's case, he is being the weird one. If that picture of him, Jason and Brad, he doesn't have the normal button. Like, I don't think that function is working on the Joe Mazzulla robot, at least yet. Maybe the patch in the off season.
Yeah, the age thing is so funny. Like when I was 10 years old, I had jerseys and basketball cards and posters of 25-year-old basketball players on the wall of my room. And now I'm 36 years old and have posters and jerseys and basketball cards on the walls, in the cupboards of my room. Still, I wanted to get back to feelings of being completely out of your depth. And Cameron, it's probably good to start with you here, given your proximity to the team. And we talked about it briefly there, but can you tell us about a time where you were maybe conducting an interview or in the locker room or wherever it may be, and just feeling completely nervous, completely out of your depth, and yet like pulling through successfully in the end?
Sure. It's funny. When I was younger, I feel like so I've tried this take on for size a few times, where like Tatum and Brown are so young. And like I think we've all had that experience of like when you're 23, 24, 25, you're kind of a dumbass. And when you're 28, 29, you just like click and you're like, oh, I'm less of a dumbass. Look at me go. I feel like when I slightly
a little bit.
I feel like when I covered the game when I was younger, I wasn't like smart enough to be nervous. Like I wasn't smart enough to be like, oh, I'm talking to LeBron. Like, now I think I'm smarter and like more conscious of the moment. And so like counterintuitively, I feel more nervous, even though I'm talking to people who are younger. I did have that moment where it was funny. Joe Mazzulla, I wish I remember the specific question. It was like, hey, Joe, like the threes weren't falling. Should you shoot more threes? And he said, no. And then he didn't say anything else. And under my breath, the cameras are obviously behind me facing Joe. They're not looking at me. I said the F word pretty physically, but under my breath. And I think he saw that, and then he just like gave an answer. So that actually is the exact opposite of your question, which is I didn't persevere. I visibly threw in the towel, and I think Joe Mazzulla took pity on me. There have been other times where, I mean, we're experiencing this now. Sometimes hearing your voice in a microphone is kind of like a jarring experience. And the first few sentences, you're like, oh no, I'm hearing my voice, and that's unnatural. For me, again, I'm struggling to find a specific anecdote, but I know that after I get a few sentences out, I find a new rhythm and I can kind of catch my breath. This is something I share this with my students, and I do this sometimes in the press room when they sometimes tell you if you're feeling really panicked to just like take note of the things that you are seeing. So like quietly to yourself, like right now I see my cell phone, I see this glass, I see my microphone. And sometimes in the press room, I'll feel myself getting animated and I'll sit and I'll just say, okay, I see my microphone, I see my bag, I see Gary Washburn, I see Brian Robb. And I know it sounds a little cheesy and it's the advice I give to a 15-year-old. It works a charm.
Grounding is really good. That's like a pretty powerful meditation technique that can help with a variety of mental health things, and especially when you're feeling nervous in the moment, can be really powerful. So that's great advice for anyone really at any moment. So
yeah,
we may have lost
if you
Cameron.
freeze up.
We may have lost. I'm glad we got that full reminder of Cameron before we
Yeah.
lost him. And now we've got his very concerned looking face on the screen here. Hopefully we'll have him back soon. But
he
Justin,
dropped that. He dropped that
Yeah.
wisdom for us. We'll go to Dr.
Perfect
Quinn on that
timing.
now.
Do you have, obviously you've got a different experience, Dr. Quinn, with your, I guess, lack of proximity to the team, but do you have any instances where you've just felt feelings of discomfort and anxiety while interviewing someone or covering the team?
Absolutely. So every once in a while, the NBA is crazy enough to throw me a random interview with a Celtic, current or past great. They gave me Jayson Tatum at the beginning of last offseason.
Yeah,
That was fine. Like I had spoken to Jayson numerous times over Zoom as a disembodied Zoom screen because of how they did that. But to me, like he's, as you guys have been saying, a kid. I'm 47. I'm a little older than I think most of you. So for me, like seeing these guys, it's just like these are coworkers in a sense. These are people who I see all the time. So like, while early on I was anxious about that kind of stuff, also being an anthropologist, I've had to interview everyone from a former Mexican president to Mara Salvatrucha on La Bestia, the train that brings migrants, the gangs that do unspeakable things to people there. So I'm pretty good at interviewing under pressure, if only through going through the crucible of all that nonsense. But then one time they sent me this guy you might have heard of, Robert Parrish. And I shit you not, I could barely talk the whole interview because for me, he was the guy on TV on the team that made me a Celtics fan. So for me, he forever will be more than just someone I'm interviewing. And I will forever, like the whole interview, I just had like a million questions racing through my head the whole time that I wanted to ask him. And I had to like try to remember the ones I'm supposed to ask him. So I actually do my interview correctly. So yeah, there are, no matter what, I think, at least for me, there's always the possibility of being shell-shocked or starstruck by the right people. That doesn't mean that like I don't consider today's stars. Just my job with relationship to them makes it so that I'm more comfortable than I am with people who I grew up idolizing, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jake.
That's being thrown in the fire. I think being a little like presidents, cartel members. Those are good reps for good basketball players.
Lower stakes, slightly lower stakes.
Sure.
I think so. The pull-up three is very important, but I guess it's good to get that perspective.
No one has tried to rob me at an NBA game that I'm aware of.
That you're aware of. That's right. So podcasting is obviously a very saturated market. Celtics podcasts alone, like where there's easily double digits of like really, really, really good Celtics podcasts. Is there anything that you guys have done you think to help you kind of stand out among the masses?
That's funny, Justin. The screens are flipped for me. I feel inclined to say thank you again for your patience with my Wi-Fi. It's funny. It's funny because I feel nervous about it, even though you are nice guys. And you're very understanding, but it's because I care. And Justin, to your point, part of why you feel nervous in this moment is because you care. And I think that's part of the story.
I mean, I care about the other people I'm interviewing too. It's just I'm used to it. And I don't interview Hall of Famers all the time.
Sure. Fair enough. Jake, I guess our listeners would be a better group to ask that question.
Sure.
Our third is Alex Goldberg, who's also a history teacher. So, I mean, our kind of like corner of the Celtics internet is maybe things that are off the court or, things that need a historical perspective. And our Apple podcast comments confirm that people are shocked at how nerdy we can be. I think, we produce consistently. We care to do it well. We have asked people who are really kind with their time to come on our show. People are shockingly kind when you ask politely and sincerely. And again, a little bit of luck goes a long way. The people at CLNS have given us a boost. The people at USA Today have given us a boost. Our nice guests have given us a boost. And then I don't know how we got so lucky, but our listeners have given us a boost. They're the best. I'm always so shocked that anyone would put me in their ears when there's so many other people they could listen to.
Yeah. Go ahead, Justin.
I just want to say a couple things. Firstly, that Aussie Phil's comment about Josue's internet, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So spot on with that. But yeah, no, like what Cam is talking about in terms of guests. So like, because I'm an anthropologist by training, we are by nature marginal observers. We approach things differently as anthropologists than, for example, a credentialed reporter like Cam would, because we're looking for the culture, which you don't get from a bunch of short interviews. And, regular reporters do the same sort of a thing with a different sort of a story in mind. But taking that perspective where you are trying to not just find, who scored the most points at X game and what you expect from them tomorrow, trying to find like the human aspects of the game and not just of the players, but the front office, the fans, you guys, whoever wants to talk to us about something that we think is something that isn't being shared, or at least very much, within the wider sphere of NBA and Celtics media, I think has been what we've been focusing on. And sometimes it fails spectacularly, but I think most of the time we learn some really cool stuff. So.
Yeah, there's at least 10 very good Celtics podcasts, and I think you guys absolutely stand out, as do the majority of them, with having a really unique voice. I know that our approach initially was this approach of, I am so, in my day-to-day life, so anxious about the outcome of everything to do with the Celtics that I just need to talk to someone about this. And we ended up doing that into microphones on the internet for the last 6 years or so now. And then I think over time, bringing on Jake and bringing on Spoonie, we've gradually become more analytical and been picked up by CLNS and started to see minor success with it. But that, again, is another unique perspective. And so I feel we've been able to comfortably slot in along with you guys, and albeit at a lower tier, given no press credentials and no qualifications of any kind, there is a unique perspective there which has allowed us a voice in this field. But it's really interesting to hear your approach to that. We are hitting the 1 hour mark, so I want to end on this question before we wrap
That's
up.
how we stand out, by always going over an hour.
We can't help ourselves. Jake and I spoke before this, like, we're going to zip through this segment in 10 minutes. We're going to get through the ad break. We're going to keep the Schadenfreude report to 2 minutes. Like, we're going to hit 45 minutes and let these guys go to bed or do what they want to do. And here we are at 1 hour and 3 minutes. So I'll wrap up on this question. Going into this season, Cameron, the expectation is pretty much, if we stay healthy, we're very likely to win the title, which is great. But it also means that there's this dark cloud looming over us at all times where one injury could just completely ruin the whole thing. And so while minute to minute, game to game, week to week, we're having a great time, we're enjoying the successes of this newly formed roster, we all know that we're a pinprick away, a small injury away from everything unraveling. How do you zoom out from that and enjoy a season like this, knowing that it could all end in a crack or a pop, to use a very literal, unfortunate term?
So sorry to beat a dead horse, but just in case my Wi-Fi once again doesn't cooperate, I'm so thrilled to have been invited on. So thank you. Just in case I disappear again, and I will say that I have been so impressed by the production value of this podcast that don't count yourselves out. The people who usually make Celtics podcasts do not make such beautiful products. So whether or not you said anything interesting, it looks really good.
That's a distraction.
Often, it'll be like to echo Jayson Tatum, it'll be like a back-to-back on a Monday that the Celtics played the Hornets, and I'm writing about what happened or what might happen. And all I really want to say is who cares? And quote Jurassic Park and say, hold on to your butts. Because nothing matters until May. It would matter if someone got injured. I'd love to see how Joe Mazzulla creates lineups and who meshes with who and yada, yada, yada. But the Celtics are in a really privileged position where, there's some data points, there's some anecdotes, there's some things that will matter. But between now and April, it's all gravy, I think. Just don't get hurt and show up in the spring. So I have certain curiosities, things that I'm wondering about. But as we said off the jump, we don't even know if Brogdon's going to be on the team. So let's just keep an eye on things, stir the pot every so often and see what happens in the spring.
I like it. Justin, what do you reckon?
Well, they always tell you that when you cover a team or a sport that you lose your fandom, and to a certain extent you do, because you start seeing what goes into a season behind the scenes, and it kind of changes your perspective. But on the other side of the coin, to reinvoke anthropology, everything's biased. We're all biased. We want to see the people who are around us that we're on friendly terms with do well. So even if you're trying to be the impossibly objective reporter, you still kind of root for those guys. I mean, I know plenty of people in the industry who cover teams that they don't actually have a quote unquote fandom for, but they still root to a certain degree for that stuff. And so,
Justin, Australians don't use that term.
What?
I'll just move right along, but then I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They go for certain players. They go for certain teams.
That's right.
Gotcha.
I've never thought about it like that before. You're right there.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, with the acknowledgement that you have bias, right, and that you are going to be rooting for a team, even if you are a journalist, just like basketball is fun. It's fun, right? So enjoy it. Like, even when things go bad, no one's shooting at you. You probably have a home if you're watching it. You probably aren't going hungry. If you are, there's people who can help you with that who are connected to the NBA. I mean, there are so many amazing things that you can latch onto that make for an enjoyable season that if you're still listening now and you haven't figured that out, I'm confused, because you guys are really smart. Your fans seem really smart. And while rings are the ultimate goal, and the response from Giannis saying that his season wasn't a failure was a bit of a cop-out, he also wasn't entirely lying, because there are important things that you can glean about yourself, about the team, about the sport in general. Just enjoy it. I'm going to.
People like me need to hear that, Jake.
Yeah.
I think you're about to say the same thing. I'm going to continue working with my therapist on leaning into that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, I would be careful with this phrasing of if we're healthy, we win the title. I'm not so sure it's as lock it up and throw away the key as we might like to think. This team should be really good. But look, this Porzingis fit, that's how, to dive into this season is like, what does this fit look like? Like, this is the biggest change we've made in a long time, sending out Marcus Smart. But yeah, Justin, you hit it. Basketball is fun. Every day, like, watching basketball, doing a thread on Derek White's defense on a back-to-back Raptors game is like really fun for me, and really fun for people to consume, evidently, as well. Like, Derek White's screen navigation is fun, and I think bringing the anthropologist on to talk about life is a great way to look at all of this. We've talked about grounding meditation with Cameron, which I love, something that I use in my everyday life. And like, look, being thankful you get to watch the Celtics games every single day and firing up League Pass and jumping around on the NBA is so fun. And I'm sure most of the people watching this or listening to this played basketball growing up or have played basketball at some point or whatever. Like, the sport itself is awesome. The people that we get as Celtics fans we get to root for are awesome. Like Jayson Tatum, the person, the most non-problematic superstar in the NBA, maybe. Malcolm Brogdon and Jaylen Brown, like the social justice warriors. Obviously losing Marcus Smart hurts just on top of him as a player, but like, there aren't many better humans that exist. But like, this team is super fun, and Robert Williams, like, his charm on a day-to-day basis is so distinct. The people behind underneath the uniform on this team are awesome, in my opinion. You just be thankful we're not dealing with some of the other stuff around the NBA, like whether it's, I don't want to go into it, but like, whether it's
Heard.
yeah, but like we're lucky. We don't deal with like really bad shit on this team as it stands, which is really, really awesome. It's all the other way. So that's what I'll say about that.
You're all absolutely right, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been so much fun and great for me personally, just to hear you all go around the room with some very calming, therapeutic remarks on perspective on this upcoming season. Cameron, Dr. Quinn, before we wrap up, anything you guys want to plug?
If someone's still listening, they know where to find us. Leave a comment. I'm so thankful that you guys invited us on. I had such a blast. So go like our podcast.
It's a lot of fun.
If you haven't liked and subscribed to this podcast, make sure you do that. That's your homework.
Agreed. Subscribe to both.
Yeah, I subscribe to that notion. Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Shout out to everyone in the chat live here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following Cam and Dr. Justin Quinn on all platforms. And, of course, subscribe to the Celtics Lab podcast, wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back early next week. Jake, love your work, mate. Until next time, go Celtics.
I love the Celtics!